So the VFL or the AFL was formed in 1896 and the first season was in 1897. However, if we look before, and there was also the V.F.A, Victorian Football Association, which was formed in 1877. And then you look further before that, and then there was just football competitions everywhere around Victoria. Which led me to think, what clubs nearly made the cut of the first ever season of VFL football and could have became founding clubs but just missed out on the cut? We've had teams for as early as 1877, even 1857. Whether it's clubs that just missed out on the VFA or nearly joined the VFL, these are 11 clubs that I found that nearly joined and formed the VFL/AFL. Let's have a look. I'm going to kick things off with Melbourne Grammar and Scotch College at the same time because they're very, very memorable clubs in the AFL scene. So these two clubs competed in the Cordner/Eagleston Cup. Some might see this as the first ever game of football played ever. Of Australian rules football, this was the first ever game played between these two, and it makes them in the it puts them in the history books. The game ran for 3 days and they had different umpires as well, even the great Tom Wills, and the game ended in a 1-1 draw between the two clubs. But how did they nearly join the VFL? They just kind of existed, probably playing in college different football leagues around Victoria, but nothing really was said about them. However, they did eventually rejoin the VFA, and I was around that 1877 mark. They were competing hard, these two. Actually, I found here, they didn't actually join the VFA. They joined the hybrid rules, or rugby, apparently. Obviously, could have made the final cut to form the VFL, but probably joined the more Metro Melbourne type leagues instead, and probably a better option to have opted for. This is a crazy one that I didn't actually know. Castlemaine. Castlemaine competed alongside Geelong, Melbourne, and all those type of clubs in 1859. They obviously lasted for a club for a very long time in those, I don't know what football league it was, the hybrid rules I think it was called. But either way, being a club made back then and still lasting today, does that mean Castlemaine could have joined the formation of the VFL? Probably not, they weren't in the V.F.A, but either way, Castlemaine, I'm going to count them as a club that could have nearly formed the VFL alongside those other clubs, but obviously didn't, leaving the hybrid rules. It's weird, I actually didn't know this until today. There was a competition called Hybrid Rules, and it says rugby for some reason, which, yeah, I don't understand it. There's really not all too much to say. Castlemaine could have formed the VFL, but just being a club around back then and playing alongside Melbourne and Geelong, they probably could have thought about Castlemaine, or Castlemaine could have thought about joining the VFA again, but they didn't. They chose the Bendigo Footy League instead. The fair call, they're a fair bit out, because Castlemaine's near Bendigo, or I think so at least. It's a little bit out of Melbourne, in the north part of the state of Victoria, but they opted for the Bendigo Footy League, and yeah, a fair enough call because a lot of travel there. Be the same with Geelong back then as well, having to travel that far. So yeah, Castlemaine could have nearly joined the VFL. Here's an unexpected one, Ballarat. Ballarat were nearly a team in the VFL. They were in the VFA from 1878 to 1899. 1896. In fact, Ballarat, their club was nearly opting to join the VFA. In fact, I think most of their members actually voted to join the VFA instead of joining a Ballarat-based football league, because obviously Ballarat, big city back then, a club that had a lot of history, a big rivalry with Geelong back in 1862 is when it first formed. These two, they did not like each other at all. So theoretically, if Geelong and Ballarat kept their rivalry up, could we have seen Ballarat in the AFL today and having a major rival with Geelong? Brunswick Football Club. The Brunswick Football Club were formed in around 1865, and unfortunately they decided to join the V.F.A instead of the VFL in 1897. Although kind of lucky they did opt to join the VFA instead, because in 1898, 1899 and 1902, Brunswick finished last in all those seasons and had a very long period of no success in those years. Brunswick were never really a team that joined, I guess, any of those big clubs that play in the AFL today. But I still reckon if they did play those other clubs, although they were late to join the VFA, they still play clubs like Hawthorn, Footscray, North Melbourne, even Richmond and University for a little bit. But other than that, if you could still count that as a team that could have joined the VFL, maybe even later on, if they joined like Richmond and University, they probably were up there to be a club to be selected to join in that time. But unfortunately, they were not, and they stayed in the VFA, and that was really the last we saw of Brunswick. They folded altogether in 1991, and ever since then, nothing has really been said of Brunswick. Oh, and something I haven't said yet, the venues these clubs played at, they played at Brunswick Park. But for Brunswick, obviously a club that's been around for a very long time, but not anymore, as they folded at the end of the 1991 V.F.A season, and it's because of 3 massive losses. Well, not really, I think they were struggling financially as well, but they left the V.F.A and folded not long after in 1991. A club that I've never heard of before, Northcote Football Club. Known as the Dragons, they were in the VFA for quite a couple of years, also being in the early times of VFA football, being a team in 1859 and lasting until, I think they were in the VFA as well, through the 1877 to 1896 period. They played at Croxton Park. Starting off at Northcote Park, but then moved to Croxton Park. I've just stuck Northcote in here for no real reason, just because they were a VFA side, and they did join around that time that Richmond University joined the VFL. It was around that 1909 period, which meant that Northcote probably could have made the league. Northcote joined the VFA in 1904, which is a little bit prior towards Richmond University's joining of the VFL, and played alongside them in the VFA, which is kind of cool. They were green and yellow, again, as I said before, which is really weird for a footy club back then to be wearing green and yellow, but hey, it's a pretty good colour mix. And I guess just the reason I've got them here, a club alongside the future clubs such as Hawthorn, North Melbourne. I've already got through them, like, yeah, the clubs that I've said before. But Northcote, a club that could have joined but didn't quite make the cut of the VFL and stayed in the VFA for the rest of their careers. There's not too much to say about this next club in Royal Park. They were just a team that kind of existed. They didn't really have a full, I guess, set ground, obviously in Royal Park, but not although that much to say about them. They didn't really have a nickname. They didn't really have a Wikipedia page to go through. Not much information about them. They're in the VFA, but I don't really know how long for. It just says they were a team that competed back then. I really have nothing else to say to that, to be completely honest with you. They were around that time period where the VFL was formed, just kind of stayed in the VFA for a little bit longer, but there's just nothing really to say about them. They just were kind of there competing, and that's about it for Royal Park. The next club is Warehousemen. Look at how long their Wikipedia page is. Nothing's even there. This is just a club that existed for no reason at all. They were called Warehousemen, and they probably played in the VFA for a little bit. In fact, they did. They played there for 2 years and called it quits. Imagine, I don't even know how they related to this. I just saw them here and thought it'd be funny to put them in. The next club is West Melbourne. So they were a team in the VFA in the formation of it in 1877, and they were a pretty okay team for the most part, West Melbourne. They didn't do all too much, but I guess a club that showed a lot of promise and fight to potentially join the VFL, and unfortunately did not make that line. They won the VFA Premiership in 1906, which is cool to see. West Melbourne, they wore red and white, and it's kind of like stripy cross design, similar to like a Geelong type of design, and played at grounds such as the North Melbourne Recreation Ground, and they played at the East Melbourne Cricket Ground as well in 1907, which was their final season before officially folding as a club, and did not quite make the VFL. And this is the two closest clubs that I can say could have joined the VFL. We're talking Williamstown and Port Melbourne Football Club. So in 1896, we saw Williamstown and Port Melbourne being the only two clubs in this league that did not join the AFL. When those clubs competed in that season, it meant that Williamstown and Port Melbourne were in a box seat to join the VFL, but they didn't make it. Now let's find out why. Now there were a lot of reasons for why Williamstown and Port Melbourne did not join the VFL in 1897. This was all due to a combination of factors that led them to not get the invite, and this being behaviour of officials, players, supporters, and it was not looking too good for them to join the league. It was more concerns about what the other clubs had, because they probably would have been wild fan bases back then, Williamstown and Port Melbourne, so I reckon that's probably the reason why they didn't get the invite. But it is official that they could have joined, but if they acted a bit more proper, they might have gotten the invite and been VFL, AFL teams today. Which, yeah, that would have been incredible to see Williamstown and Port Melbourne. Like, imagine that. They would have had their own stadiums as well. Williamstown would have played here. Maybe at a stadium that looks like, I don't know, this or something like that. Port Melbourne as well would have had, actually they probably would have played at Marvel, I reckon. Yeah, Port Melbourne probably would have played games at Marvel if that move ever happened to them. They wouldn't have got a new stadium. They would have been stuck at the old Port Melbourne Recreation Ground. And yeah, but unfortunately for them, due to their behaviour issues, the clubs were not invited to join the VFL, and probably the closest to what I can say were clubs that nearly joined the VFL/AFL. There are over 40 other clubs that I could talk about here, but I'm not going to. Those were the ones that were the closest to being the formation clubs of the then VFL competition, and maybe could have even still been competing in the AFL today. If you guys enjoyed today's video and would like to see more videos like this in the future, do leave a like and subscribe to my channel as well. I'm on the road to 3,000 subscribers and I want to get there as soon as possible, so do consider to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell as well, and consider becoming a member as well for just $2.99 a month. You do not want to miss out on that. But anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See yous.